Hi all, welcome to today's discussion on TDS, TCS, assessment under GST, audit under GST. All are different topic. One has no connection with the other topic, and everything has a small legacy to say. With that legacy, we will make our discussion. Coming back here, tax deduction, tax deducted at source. TDS is a very common word from an income tax perspective. But for a GST, it was little uncommon, or for that matter, in indirect taxes itself, in a small way, only one particular service by name called as construction services alone was leviable under works contract tax (WCT) as a collection mechanism, or a deduction mechanism wherein which it will be deducted. But for it, there were no deductions that are being there. Coming back here, what is this TDS? To whom it is applicable? What are all the transactions that are going to be covered here? Followed by, are there any return to be filed by a deductor of TDS? How the deductee is going to claim credit? That would be our prime discussion on this topic. Coming back to TDS, as far as TDS is concerned, very interesting to note. This is a tax deducted at source, which means when the supply is being happening, at that moment, somebody is going to collect or extract as tax and pay to government. There were many disputes that were happening in and around various government departments. What happened is, many times the government departments and the government had paid whatever suppliers have asked as taxes. One minute. One minute. There was an automatic closure of the PowerPoint. Just a minute. Normally, what used to happen is, when it comes to all these discussions relating to government related transaction, very meticulously government departments pay a lot of money to the contractors, but contractor never complied with that very carefully or very meticulously. And many times what is the experience of the government is, or the government body is, for example, in 2 or 3 cases where we were very personally involved in those audits by name called as forensic audit, we otherwise call it as, in those audits, when we go back and verify that government has in fact paid money to the respective vendor, it is that vendor who has not made payment to the government. It is that vendor who has in fact cheated the government. So, and one of the biggest disadvantage in a transaction with government is, majority of the government organization will not have earlier value added tax number, now GST number. Because for them, their services are either exempted or not leviable to GST. For example, somebody is providing hospital services or government hospital, it is that there is a healthcare society. That healthcare society is not registered with the government or registered with GST because of a very simple reason. Any services by government is exempted. Even otherwise, healthcare service is exempted. But let us go in the track of government. But very interesting to note, this is where the whole situation would change. The same government hospital wants its air conditioning need to be repair and maintenance. It's a particular operation, OT of bone marrow, particular operation which they will do. for certain oncology based diseases. So this bone marrow related operation to be performed, that area air conditioning need to be done. There is a ducting unit, all that requirement which we are familiar with. That is done by a person. That fellow quotes 4 crore rupees will be my cost, plus it is a works contract, 18% GST I will add. Government very meticulously pay this fellow 4 crores plus pay this fellow another 48 lakhs. But what happens is, this fellow, the vendor, reports to the government authority, reports to the department that he has received a contract for 40 lakhs and that GST payable is 4 lakh 80,000. Let me repeat it, he is not eating away. He is not eating away the government money. He has to do all the work, but he is beautifully eating away the tax that is collected from the government. He has to do all the work for 4 crore rupees, otherwise money will not be granted. But look from a government, look from a GST department perspective. Now you can ask me, sir, is this not be visible? Come on, if it is the total turnover of that organization is 4 crore only, it will be visible. If the total turnover of the organization is 400 crore, and in that 4 crore he does like this, come on, it will be very tough for somebody to identify. What I'm shared is not a single experience. Like this, various experiences. Government made a point very clear. Anyone who deal with government, there has to be a trial left in the system. How to make a trial left in the system? Best modality, what income tax has taught us is deduct a tax, leave it there. Allow the party to claim it and set it off. That is the best method. Being inspired from income tax department, the GST TDS is introduced from 1st October 2018. From 1st October 2018, when any supply of services provided to central government, state government, local authority, or government authority. Government authority means which is organization formed by central government or state government, where 90% and above equity control is with central government or state government. For example, your Indian Institute of Management, IIM. IIM is nothing but a central government authority. So wherever 90% and above of equity stake is held with government is called as government authority, or somebody who is appointed as a board, as a society to do some activities, then it would be treated as government authority. So whenever services are provided to central government, local authority, government authority, or such other person as may be notified. Who are those other persons that are notified? Nothing. Any board, look at that wording, any board. Any board means what? It could be a state government owned board or a central government owned board. Chennai Metropolitan Sewage Water Treatment, Metro Water and Sewage Water Treatment Board. A notified person. Or where 51% is held by central or state government, task mark. Again, so it could be in wherever government involved in that transaction. Where, so not straight away you can say government. End of the day, ultimate beneficiary is a government related company. Then where they receive any supply, government is going to receive a supply, and the value of supply exceeds consolidatedly more than 2.5 lakhs in a year, then TDS at the rate of 1% will be deducted. A tax deducted at source at the rate of 1% will be deducted, provided if a supplier supplies a taxable supply to a recipient, where the recipient being central government, state government, local authority, governmental authority, or any board of central government, state government, or where the government hold more than 51% of equity stake. So it is as simple as that. A chartered accountant provide chartered accountancy services to a board, Tamil Nadu Electricity Board, private, limited, one company is there. Now, point here is any services provided by the chartered accountant to the board has to deduct. Now, board is turned out to be a company. That company has to deduct TDS 1% and pay only the balance to him. That 1%, the company, the government company, will refer this fellow's GST number and pay. They will say, we have collected 1%. We have given him a contract of 1 crore rupee. On that 1 crore rupee, here see 1% CGST, 1% SGST. Comes to 1 crore contract where 1 lakh rupee we have paid. Now, the most important aspect of this discussion is, by this activity, there is a trial in the whole transaction. Now, when TDS deduction becomes mandatory, if the value of services exceed 2.5 lakhs, the chartered accountant does an internal audit. Monthly, he is being paid 30,000 rupees. Then the value in total crosses 3,60,000, which again crosses 2,50,000. TDS under GST is applicable. Don't get confused with your income tax TDS. That is separate. That is under the income tax law, under section 192, 194, all that 195, all that stuff is applicable. This is a GST TDS. If you want, make yourself more comfortable. Largely applicable only to public sector undertaking, central government, state government, local authority. You can ask me, then why you are asking us to, or why you are discussing with us this provision? I am not discussing this provision before you from a deductor perspective. I am discussing the provision from a deductee perspective. If you are a client, if the organization that you represent, if they are involved in a government contract, they are going to do a PWD contract, then of the money payable, 1% would be deducted by the government. Yes, if 1% is deducted by the government, yes, what government will do? They will file one return by name called as Form GSTR 7 and issue a TDS certificate in a form called as GSTR 7A. A return will be filed in a form called as GSTR 7 and it will be given, a certificate will be given under section 7A. Moving forward, what the deductee can do? Very simple. Deductee can claim the TDS in his electronic cash ledger. Come on. Any case, I'm sure in our last class discussion, we would have read about my tax liability will be paid by two ways. If I have a 10,000 rupees tax payable, I will first use my credit and then I will use my cash payments. Whatever tax is deducted by the deductor, that money, whatever tax that is deducted by the deductor, that money is directly paid to the government, comes to the recipient, and if the recipient accepts the transaction, it goes to the electronic cash ledger of the recipient. Let me repeat. The tax that is paid by the deductor comes to the deductee account. All of us have already experienced something like Form 26AS under Income Tax Act. Like how a deductor file a particular form under income tax called as Form 26 Form 26 QA, QB, QC. I think we have a lot of forms. Now, once the TDS return is filed, automatically the deductees accounts are all credited with amount. Similarly, here automatic credit is not happening. A pull credit will happen. You have to go select the transaction and accept it. Yes, it is my credit. We have to go select the transaction and accept it. It is my credit. Then only it will come to your account. If we leave it as it is, it will also be left as it is. So come back here. These are the broader discussions associated with it. Are there any exemptions? Are there any exception to this discussion? Yes, there are exemptions. Two important exemptions. Exemption number one. There will be no TDS applicable if both supplier and recipient are going to be public sector undertaking. If IOCL is going to sell goods to HPCL or HPCL sell goods to IOCL, no deduction of TDS will be applicable. If it is going to be IOCL selling it to Taskmark, or it is going to be Taskmark selling it to some services to Co-optex, or whatever be it, again, no TDS would be applicable, either between two central government PSUs or a two state government PSU or a central government and a state government PSU. TDS would not be applicable. Again, to the contrary, when this TDS will be deducted, this TDS will be deducted either at the time of payment made or at the time of credit of the money to the supplier, credit to the supplier's account, or at the time of payment. When it comes to exemption, I think we have discussed about PSU to PSU. Similarly, one more exemption is there in case of interstate supply. When goods are supplied from by a person located in another state, or services are supplied by a person located in another state, in case of interstate supply, no doubt TDS will not be applicable. So these are your broader points. Let me repeat. Last 10-12 minutes, I have consciously spent on the various aspects of the TDS. The whole idea for us is, in case of services like this, or if we provide, or if we are anywhere connected with central government or state government or something like that, then we have to take accordingly certain calls. Let's take up a discussion here. Tamil Nadu Election Commission. Tamil Nadu Election Commission. Tamil Nadu Election Commission, State Election Commission, has engaged a builder for construction of a government building for rupees 7.5 crores, of which 7.5 crores plus GST is payable at the rate of 12%. To this contractor received a payment on 24/2/2020 rupees 3 crores, and his balance payment was made on 28/6/2020. Okay. Tamil Nadu State Election Commission wants to know, are they liable for registration under GST? Do they need to deduct TDS? I'll ask a first question. Is the Tamil Nadu State Election Commission has to get themselves registered under GST is Tamil Nadu Election Commission. One mistake happened here. 1 minute. This question is on your screen now. Tamil Nadu Election Commissioner, State Election Commissioner has engaged a builder for construction of a building for rupees 7.5 crores, and they have paid a first payment of 3 crores on 24/2/2020, and the balance payment was made on 28/6/2020. They want to know whether State Election Commissioner has to get themselves registered. They get a grant and they do a election processing, election expenses, that's all. Yes. MC Rajan sir says yes, Amit says yes, Uday Shankar says yes, administrator says no, Rakesh Balakrishnan says yes, Anusha says yes. Yes. Section 24 of CGST Act makes it mandatory, or to put it in another way, mandatorily they have to get themselves registered. We have a list of 11 people. Among that 11 people, one fellow is going to be a person who is going to deduct TDS. Now, Tamil Nadu State Election Commission has to deduct TDS. When and which date, how much? When and which date, how much? Yes. On which day, how much? I think first payment is 3 crores and the balance payment should be 4.5. Then only your 7.5 crores will tally. Of course, plus GST, you don't be bothered about it. Okay. Now the question for us is, on which day they have to deduct TDS? The month of February or in the month of June? Yes. In the month of February or in the month of June? How much percentage, how much amount? That's all. So you can quickly type it out, we can close it. Quick, fast. 24/2/2020, 6 lakhs. Good. Administrator, we all know 1%, all that and all. Number is more important always. Good. On 24/2, why 6 lakhs? I don't understand that logic. Why 6 lakhs? How we get that 3 lakhs? Sorry, how we get that 6 lakhs? I'm sorry. 1% of CGST, 1% of SGST. Super. 1% of value. Let me repeat. 1% of value. It is not 1% of CGST. Okay. Now, 1% as CGST. Tax will be deducted. That is, the 1% will be collected and go as what? CGST. If they pay 3 crore, on 3 crore, 1% will go towards CGST. Another 1% will go towards SGST. I know, that is why I had a problem. I know this error would happen. A lot of us would do what, 3 crore into 12% into 1%. Or 6% into 1%. Nothing of that sort. It is 3 lakhs in the month of February and 4.5 lakhs in the month of June. So that is how it has to be done. In fact, only for that purposes we did this practical discussion. Otherwise, it is not relevant. Now, what is the compliance that need to be done by the State Election Commission if we're going to discuss? Only one compliance. They have to file a return on or before 10th day of the subsequent tax period. That is to say, for the month of April, May 10th. For the month of May, June 10th. For the month of July, August 10th. On or before 10th day, they have to file a very simple form, 1-page form. I would not even say 1 page, quarter-page form. Serial number, GST number of supplier, name of the supplier, total value of payment made, 1% CGST, 1% SGST. That's all. Exactly. That's all written. Put every dealer, submit, pay that money, close. Then issue a certificate in Form 7A. which has to happen before 15th day from the end of the month. Now they have came out very recently in an amendment made in 2020. They have even withdrawn that TDS certificate need not be given because the credit is claimed in a particular mode. Because of that reason, that certificate requirement is also now lost its importance again. R limited, R limited. No. 1% CGST and 1% SGST. You are reading it only from a CGST law perspective. See whether it is good or right or wrong. When I referred here, I referred it only from a CGST section perspective. Like that, you have a SGST section. Okay. So if you go to that section, it will say 1% as SGST. So understand the fellow is liable to pay 12% tax, 6%, 6%. On that 6%, 1% is only collected upfront. So any case, coming back here. And of course, whatever money paid by the government, it will be, once it is claimed, it will be credited to his electronic cash ledger. And it can be used for any purposes. Coming back here. As far as a return is concerned, a return has to be filed under the TDS. Now, moving forward, let's take up a situation. R Limited has supplied goods for rupees 80,000 to Chennai Metro Water Board. Okay. R Limited has supplied goods worth rupees 80,000 to Chennai Metro Water Board. Now, similarly, R Limited has supplied cab services to Chennai Metro Water Board. For rupees 2 lakhs. R Limited has supplied cab services to Chennai Metro Water Board for rupees 2 lakhs. Both are taxable supply. Both are taxable supply. Question before you is, does TDS is applicable? Does the organization, for this organization, TDS is applicable or TDS is not applicable? Yes or no? Shankar sir says no. Amit says no, TDS is applicable. Yes or no? Supragasham sir says yes. See, they use the word supply. Supply means it can be a supply of goods or supply of services. Look at the catch there. Value of supply. When value of supply exceeds 2.5 lakhs, you have to start deducting TDS. And here the value will exceed 2.5 lakhs. TDS is applicable and it has to be deducted. Both are taxable. TDS is applicable only on cab services. Why? Why only on cab services, Vasant Kumar ji? Can you text it? Why only on cab services? Why not on goods also? MC Rajendran, 2,08,000. I don't understand this number, sir. MC Rajendran, sir, I don't understand 2,08,000. TDS is 28,003. Anushka, how you get the 28,003? Sir, let me repeat it. Here, Vasant Kumar, sir, first question. Can you say me where it is told that only supply of service alone is liable for TDS? Vasant Kumar, sir, can you say anywhere? Have you discussed? Oh, 8,000 I have typed. No, it is 80,000. Sorry. I think I have pronounced it rightly. My number is wrong. It is 80,000. That's then only it will cross. No. If it is 8,000, then there is no charm. Why TDS would be applicable? We can easily close it. 80,000. I'm sorry, it's a typo error. No. Come back here. Where it is told only Its value of supply, let me repeat, supply word we have defined already. It will include both goods and services. So kindly make a note, Vasant Kumar sir, it is the complete value is liable for TDS. This sums up a complete discussion on TDS. In fact, a very detailed discussion on TDS. Like TDS, there is another section called as TCS. What is this TCS? Now, a little opposite of TDS is TCS. In a case like what is it? In a case like supplier recipient, in TDS we have gave the responsibility to collect tax or deduct tax and pay to government to the recipient. In a case like e-commerce operator, take Flipkart for a matter, or Amazon, whomever it might be. These fellows are all e-commerce operator, basically. They just connect people. They connect supplier, they connect recipient. They have a group of suppliers, they have a larger group of recipient. They try to connect both supplier and recipient through an information technology portal, which is called as the e-commerce trade, and the organizer of all this is called as e-commerce operator. All that is fair, agreeable. But what many times happens is some of those e-commerce operators are not complying under the earlier law in a great way. That is one of the disadvantages. At this juncture, I would ask a very fundamental question. This is fundamental question. If a person supply goods through e-commerce operator, a person supply goods through e-commerce operator, okay, for him registration is mandatory or optional? No, my question this time is different. For him registration is mandatory or optional. Mandatory means, what I mean here is he need to get himself registered immediately, or he can wait till 20 lakhs and after crossing 20 lakhs he can get himself registered. That is what is my word mandatory and optional means here. Is it mandatory or optional? Quick. Okay. He can wait till 20 lakhs. Wait until the limit cross 20. It's okay. But few of you are agreeing, no, it is mandatory. Mandatory or optional? Just for your information, any supply of goods through e-commerce operator, registration is mandatory. Section 24 will say. Now, why I want to highlight this discussion is, many people have cheated government like anything. I know, I personally know. Okay. I'll share a very unique situation. Okay. This is which has happened to one of our clients' case, where uh, one fine day my senior partner called me sometime during 2016 and said, Ganesh, there is a new startup guy came. He want to do some trade business, it seems, to e-commerce operator. Can you guide him? I said, why not? Asked him to come. And on a discussion with him, I understood his business will not cross 10 lakhs. Just for information for a lot of you, prior to GST, we had a value-added tax. Value-added tax threshold is 10 lakhs. We were in fact at the fag end of the fag end of December, and it was about to another 2-3 weeks or time. January is going to step in. So I told him, this year you will not cross. Maybe 16, 17, if you cross, we will take registration. He asked, no, sir. For the last 1 year, I'm doing business. In my account itself, it crossed 8 lakhs. So give me some solution. I told, okay, you open another bank account in your spouse name, and he informed me his spouse is a homemaker. I said, you open a bank account in your spouse name and you start selling those goods through your spouse name, collect money there, so that two different individual, agreeable, both of you can enjoy 10 lakhs. Of course, that dispute is there, but again, both of you can enjoy 2 lakhs. I told them, sent it sometime during mid of Jan or first week of February. I'm not able to remember. Sometime during 2016. After that, as usual, no typical chartered accountant office. 1 week later, when we sit for a review, a bill was sent to him because he has almost taken some 2-3 hours of my time. He discussed with many aspects. I was all allowed to him, and I sent a bill for it. Okay. For a long time, he never paid, and I was also kept with my work busy. Everything went on, life move on. Sometime during May 2017, I received a call from this gentleman because he has not paid earlier fee itself. I am not interested, but of course, I picked this call. He said, I have to brief you something. I said, no, I'm in a meeting. I'll come back to you later. Again, I was not inclined to call him because he was not little hesitant. He was never paid my fee. He is little hesitant to receive me. So I left it as it is. Oh, at once, twice, I disconnected his call. He went to my senior partner from whom he was referred to me. And my senior partner called me. Senior partner, first lift, you have to take the call. Beyond 2 rings, you are not allowed. That is what is called a senior partner. So he called me, why you are not taking his call? Sir, sent a small bill. He is not ready to pay that small bill, then why I have to pick this call? Oh, no, I'll ask him to pay him. Don't ask him to pay, sir. Ask him to come with the checkbook. First check for me, then only any discussion. Gave him an appointment. He came to my office, 3rd week of May 2017, where I was a little busy with GST implementation, all that related matters. He showed me a notice saying that I did the transaction as per your advice only, but I was being caught by the department. I said, see, boss, at no stretch of imagination, if you did like me or the structuring which is given by me, it would not be possible. He asked me, then I told him, what you did? He said, see, by April, May, in my account, I crossed 8.5 lakhs. Okay, good. In 2016-17, these are all happened during 16-17. So June, July, I used my spouse account. Okay, good. Then he told me, then what you did? So I don't want to pay tax. I'm not inclined to get myself registered. So I repeated the same with my 2 daughters. Okay, yaar, even then they are all individual. Then what is the problem here? Suddenly it struck me and I asked them, what is your daughter doing? He said, sir, first daughter is pursuing UKG, second standard is third standard. For a UKG kid and a third standard kid who opened a minor account, connected that minor account with e-commerce operator, did a transaction for 8 lakhs. I was, in fact, more surprised. See, fellow spouse, daughter one, daughter two, this all I know because I'm discussing with them. But how the enforcement officer know this? That was my curiosity. That was my surprise. Now, I was little, in fact, how he would have got it. What is the common thread? I went, everybody's, what is it, the supplier ID, they will say, that is different, mail ID is different, mobile numbers are different, bank accounts are different. I'm not able to understand at what stage of imagination government can mix this. How government able to know all this? Government does not have the ration card. If they could have the ration card, then yes, no doubt, it is possible. But how government know? Fellow gave the secondary mail ID a common mail ID. Hope you could be able to appreciate it. The secondary mail ID was a clear common mail ID. So because of that reason, government identified that all these transactions are done by a same fellow. In fact, not only this government, every state government has lost so much of money. Because of that reason only, a strong condition came in the act itself. Supply through e-commerce operator, registration is mandatory. And now a new fraud started. As there are cash on deliveries, they will supply the goods for 10,000 rupees, collect from the customers plus GST. 10,000 rupees plus 1,800, 11,800 rupees is collected from customer. But what is reported by that individual supplier to the government was 1,000 rupees and 180. Comfortably ignored a zero at the last. Government able to discover transactions like this. I think I already shared one of our client who did transactions with Swiggy. Okay. There were people who did it in their personal name, SB accounts, this, that, blah, 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 blah. In all these situations, government made a point very clear. So we will identify the e-commerce operator. We will ask the e-commerce operator to, we will comfortably ask the e-commerce operator to collect a to collect a TCS and pay to the government and give information about how much goods he has supplied through e-commerce operator, how much services he has supplied through e-commerce. In fact, this is the reason. This is the reason why today TCS becomes important. Whenever any supply of goods or services through e-commerce operator, the e-commerce operator will collect tax and pay to the government. As per law, they are supposed to collect 1% CGST and 1% SGST on the aggregate value of supply. However, there was a special notification issued and the rate was reduced to 0.5% of CGST, 0.5% of SGST, and 1% of IGST. So coming back here, any supply of goods or services electronically through e-commerce operator, then no doubt the e-commerce operator has to collect tax at the rate of 0.5% CGST, 0.5% SGST, file all these information in a return for every supplier. This supplier with this GST number, this month supply goods so much, intra so much, inter so much. On intra, CGST 0.5, SGST 0.5. On inter, IGST 1. This information will be filed, and once this information is filed, the collectee or from whom tax was collected, that person would be eligible to claim credit in his electronic cash ledger. All of us might have a doubt how the credit can be claimed, which we will take it up in another 1 or 2 minutes. Again, e-commerce operator has to file a unique return called as GSTR8, a simple statement of tax collected at source. From which supplier, which GST number, what is the value of intrastate supply, interstate supply, and the respective TCS that they have been collected. It will be filed on or before 10th day of the subsequent tax. That sums up a discussion relating to no, MC Rajendran sir, from supplier. I think I'm very clear. E-commerce operator will collect tax from supplier. If you buy a mobile phone, you are a consumer. The person who is selling goods to you is a supplier. Amazon or Flipkart is e-commerce operator. E-commerce will collect from supplier. Monthly, they'll allow you to do business for the whole month. And at the end of the month, they will collect for all the supplies that you made, entire value into 0.5 CGST, 0.5 GST, entire value of IGST into 1. That is how it will be collected and a return will be filed. How the respective person would be entitled to claim that credit. Now, in fact, some of us would be little familiar with this topic. For some of us, our clients, or we are not aware of how the clients would be entitled to claim TDS return or TCS credits. When we go back to the respective return login, we would have something called as your returns. Once we logged in the returns, TDS and TCS case credit received. Let me repeat, TDS and TCS credit received. If we select TDS and TCS credit received, it will allow us to select the financial year and the month for which we want to know the auto-drafted TDS TCS credit received statement. When we put a search, it will take us to the basic information for which period we are going to refer, and in that period, how much TDS is received. How much TDS is received will be known. For example, in this case, only one TDS was there. The value was 6 lakhs, and the amount that has been accepted as tax is 1% CGST, 1% SGST. It is a TDS. So if you could able to know, it is a TDS credit. Likewise, similar screens will be available for TCS. You have to go inside. Once this box will be there, you have to select inside. You have to select it, and then you have to accept that transaction. The moment transaction is accepted, it will be credited to the electronic cash ledger of the respective individual. That is a small process which need to be carried out to claim all TDS credit or TCS credit. As few clients alone we have for TDS, TCS, with that we could able to come up with screen presence for you. Same process. Main area is this area. Returns, TDS, TCS, one tab will be there. Select that tab, select a financial year. If in case, as I see told, sir, I did with governments, go and check. You will be able to know. And it will come as a portal. You will select the portal and you have to accept the amount. See, after accepting, it is appearing. Before accepting, it will be there. But after accepting, it will allow you to file a self-confirmed verification statement. You can verify it so that that credit will be automatically transferred from the respective portion to the electronic cash ledger as a TDS credit. That sums up our complete discussion relating to TDS and TCS. Moving forward, getting into an area by name called as assessment. As far as assessment is concerned, we are all aware of this term, nothing new. GST is a self-assessment regime. Under GST, it is a self-assessment regime, which means registered person, he himself will pay tax, assess tax, and file return by himself. And he will ensure that he reports a true and a correct picture every time. Let me repeat, not true and fair view. It's a true and correct picture every time. So if there is any goods need to be classified, he'll classify it rightly. If in case any product need to be, any rate of tax need to be determined, he will determine it correctly. In case any value need to be determined, he'll determine it correctly. In case if you want to claim ITC, he'll claim it correctly. Every goods, every services will be correctly determined by him and he will pay by himself. That is what section 59 says, self-assessment. Every return under GST is a self-assessed return. Supplier, he himself determine the liability, adjust the self-assessed ITC, and pay the tax to the government. That model is called as a self-assessment. There is an additional model of assessment called as a provisional assessment, rarely used. Not regularly used, rarely used. The name itself says it is a provisional assessment. It is not regular at all, extremely rare. When provisional assessment will be applicable? First of all, there should be two situations. When tax liability cannot be determinable, I am not in a position to determine my tax payable. Let's all think first of all, when that situation will come. When someone would come out and say, I am not in a position to determine my tax. When he would say, there could be only two reasons. If someone has an issue in valuing the product, if someone has an issue in classifying the product, if it is a rate of tax issue, or if it is going to be a value related issue, then only someone can come out and say that I am not in a position to determine my tax liability. Maybe if I give this discussion, we all will agree to it. If it is a normal product, it is liable for a 18% GST. However, if the product is an Ayurvedic product, it is liable for 5% GST. You are a manufacturer of a particular product and you are of a view your product is an Ayurvedic product. But unfortunately, it is the Ayurvedic Council of India should decide your product is Ayurvedic or not. Good, sir. I will make an application. Good, you make an application. You will make an application today, but Ayurvedic Council of India will give you an answer to this application 1 year later or 8 months later on an average. 8 months later, the authority would come out and say that yes, your product is an Ayurvedic product. If my product is an Ayurvedic product, then I have to collect and pay to government only what? 5%. If I collected less and paid more also, I am into loss. If tomorrow government said your product is not Ayurvedic product also, I would be into loss. In those exceptional discussion, not a regular discussion, exceptional discussion, government, supply registered person may make an application, to the jurisdictional officer and request him to pass a provisional assessment order or a provisional order, request the proper officer to allow him to file the return and pay taxes provisionally, at least for a minimum of 6 months. After 6 months, a final assessment will happen. It is something like this. Today I made an application. Tomorrow onwards, I start manufacturing the product. When I sell, I will have a doubt. Do I need to collect and pay 18 or do I need to pay 5? I'm a strong believer that my product will be 5% only. Okay, I collected 5, paid 5. In between, one officer comes and asks, why you are paying 5? I would say my product is an Ayurvedic product. Your product is an Ayurvedic product or your product for which Ayurvedic license is pending. I would say for your product, Ayurvedic license is what? Pending. So your product is Ayurvedic product, not an Ayurvedic product. No, pay 18%. So again, downside is tomorrow when Ayurvedic Council gives me approval, it will be give me approval with retrospective effect from the day in which I made application. When there is an uncertainty in valuation, when there is an uncertainty in classification of goods, only on those circumstances, let me repeat, only on those circumstances alone, we will use provisional assessment. Very rarely it is used, where you can make a request to the jurisdictional officer or proper officer, and the proper officer within 90 days from your request, from the date of receipt of such request, he has to allow a person to file or pay tax on provisional basis. That provisional allowance can be will be valid for a period of 6 months. In case you want to extend the provisional assessment, very well, you can make application to additional commissioner and joint commissioner. They can extend for a further period of 6 months. You want to extend furthermore 1 year, beyond 1 year, already 6 months AC gave, then additional commissioner and joint commissioner gave another 6 months. You want to extend it beyond that time, you can extend it. Look at the big downside. When you are involved in it in a very great way, you will know the biggest downside is from the date on which you are liable to pay tax, from the day in which your return is finally assessed. From the day from the due date till the final date of assessment, the person is liable to pay interest. A beautiful theoretical topic. At least for the last 10 years, I know provisional assessment was there in excise, provisional assessment was there in service tax, provisional assessment was there in VAT, provisional assessment was there in every single law. Not even once exercised by the client. No one will exercise. Everyone will want to go to self-assessment. Riskier proposal. Very, very risky. But just be aware that there is an option. Before moving to the next section, which discuss about scrutiny of returns, we'll do one thing. A small administrative change has to be done. I have to get relocated to another place from the current place where I'm currently discussing. Just give me 5 minutes. I'll just get relocated and then connected. Don't go anywhere. Stay in the room. I'll also keep my system on. We'll come back. Just give me 2-3 minutes. Coming back here, getting back to the discussions relating to provisional assessment. As I earlier mentioned, you have this format. This can be exercised by the assessee, but very rarely we would exercise. If you ask me, in a decade of practice, I would have exercised only 3 times for this. And almost on all 3 times, there was a serious fire accident that happened in the factory. Because earlier provisional assessment under excise would have used a word where a person is not in a position to determine rate of tax, value of supply, or on behalf of any other reason. Now, consciously that word was removed. Now, it can be claimed only on two broader grounds. If someone has a difficulty in determining his rate of tax, or someone has a difficulty in valuing his goods or services, as the case may be. Somebody has filed the authority of advance ruling and the application is pending before authority of advance ruling. If the authority of advance ruling told 18%, he'll pay 18%. The authority of advance ruling told it is 12%, he'll pay 12%. Until that time, don't know what to do. Yes, so you can use an option like provisional assessment. These are all rare discussions. In practice, rarely used. Getting into one of the very important assessment modality from the returns perspective. Every return filed by a registered person, be it CMP 08 filed by a composition levy person, or GSTR 1 or GSTR 3B, these returns can be scrutinized by the officer. The proper officer has all powers to scrutinize the return, verify the correctness of the return, ensure whether those returns are correctly filed. If in case there are any discrepancies, he can ask for an explanation through an intimation of letter. And for this, generally within 30 days, reply need to be submitted. Failing which, if within 30 days, or we can ask for an extension. See, today we are being slapped with many type of notices. I'm sure a lot of you virtually present here can agree that we are receiving notices for difference between GSTR 1 and GSTR 3B. We are getting notices from difference between GSTR 2A and 3B. All these notices are issued under section 61 only. And maximum reply time is 30 days, or we have to go make a request, get an extension for time. Otherwise, officer might take a next step of action, which can be audit, investigation, search, survey, anything he can do. But primary is officer saw your return, not happy with the return. He asked for an explanation. You gave an explanation and it is acceptable. Matter ends, no further action, case closed. You gave an explanation, or you have not given an explanation within 30 days, then proper officer may intimate or may initiate all those appropriate action to take forward this matter. So scrutiny of return is a regular process done by a jurisdictional officer, where all those GST officers, jurisdictional officers, have power to issue a scrutiny, do a scrutiny assessment and come up with notices. In case somebody has not filed a return, let me repeat, they are a registered person, but those people has not filed a return. Now, generally what happens is a registered person will be issued with a notice under 3A that you have not filed your return. Okay. The proper officer, once that notice is issued, if the registered person furnished all the return within 30 days, then there is nothing, absolutely nothing. There is nothing more to hear. He has furnished the return, paid the tax, everything is done, then matter ends there. In case he has not turned up at all, department will assess him based on best of the judgment method, best of his judgment. What do we mean by best judgment method? Means somebody is a registered person, the government asked him some information, but in case if that information is not shared properly or information is not given, this fellow also not filed return, but keep on doing business. What government will do is they have the information. What is your bank account? They'll call your bank and say, give your bank statement. Send the bank statement of this person. They will issue a formal notice. Bank manager will give the bank statement. These people will see the bank statement, take the complete credit and say, this credit into 18% is your GST payable, and attach your bank account, attach your property, do whatever they want. When this assessment, like best judgment assessment, is possible, when the assessee has not filed returns. Sir, once notice is sent, assessee has complied with the law, filed the return within 30 days, then everything will move based on the return filed by the assessee. An unregistered person, let me repeat, not a registered person who not filed return. When he is actually liable for registration, he has not obtained registration, then for him also, based on best of the judgment, that is best judgment assessment means with the data available, how I can best assess. That is what is best judgment assessment. That best judgment assessment will be done and the order will be passed. Before an order will be passed, opportunity of being heard, very popularly called as OBH, opportunity of being heard will be given, because when you're going to say someone, or when you're going to say some other person that you have to pay so much tax, you should give him an explanation. You should allow him to explain why he is not liable to pay tax. Without opportunity of being heard, if we close any case, then it will be against the principles of natural justice. Everywhere, natural justice should be followed. That is what is the any quasi-judicial activity, principles of natural justice to be followed is one of the very important aspect associated. So assessment of non-filers, assessment of unregistered person always will be based on best judgment method. Administrator has raised a question, is the return is an annual return under 9? I don't know where you are referring this question. I'm not sure when you posted this question also. Is it 1 and 3B? I don't understand. Can you be a little elaborate on this question so that I could be able to answer it well? Coming back here, section 64 talks of a summary assessment. See, based on some intelligence information, based on some special information, this is the right time. If we go and catch it, we would be able to file him. Return means where in these cases return you are asking, these returns. Return means all return, 1, 3B, 9, or it is going to be your CMP 08, GSTR 4, or in case of certain specified person, 5, 6, 7, 8. Every return becomes a return. Every document becomes a return which need to be complied with. So return is a generic term. Okay. Come back. Moving forward from assessment of non-filer and unregistered person. See, sometimes government comes to know certain intelligence information. This person came, did a business here. Now he is going out. This is the right time to go and catch him. Okay. At that time, they will do a protective assessment based on the information. Actually, he has not even completed its service. Actually, he has not even collected that money. Before itself, they will do an assessment. We came to know that it is so much revenue you should have received. So kindly pay us so much tax. Very, very common when it comes to all this film industry and all. So a summary assessment is based on certain intelligence information. They will act and they will say them, we know we have information that you have sold the film for so much crores. Kindly pay so much tax upfront. You file your return, you say a taxable exempted and all afterwards. Now first pay tax, because it is in the interest of the revenue. Government will react in that way, which is very right. That sums up the discussion relating to assessment. Very core to be noted is every assessment under GST is a self-assessment. Somebody has not filed return, somebody is an unregistered person, best judgment method will be followed. Best judgment means officer will decide based on the best of his judgment. Because there are no formal invoices, this, that and all. Whatever money credited to the bank account would be treated as income. That's all. Based on that, he will order. So that's a model at which it will be operated. Coming back here, getting into a last topic for our discussion, audit. Broadly, there are 3 audits under GST. Let me repeat at a very broad level, I'm sure. Section 65 audit, which will be an audit done by a department person. Section 66 audit, which is a special audit done by a chartered accountant or a cost accountant. Where that special audit is by a chartered accountant or a cost accountant, where that auditor is appointed by the commissioner of GST. The commissioner of GST will appoint the chartered accountant to do the audit. The commissioner of GST will appoint the cost accountant to do audit. And another audit, which is often we call it as GST audit, section 35, subsection 5 audit, where this 9(c) annual return audit. All these 3 are the 3 different types of audit under GST. We'll take one after the other and discuss because a lot more points need to be discussed. Actually, this audit by department will be the most important one because it is the respective commissioner would have authorized the officers. Those officers will issue an intimation, come to the office of the person and do the audit and then submit a report to the commissioner. Coming back here, the commissioner who is going to appoint the person, that person name, for which year it is going to be audited, what records they will come and verify, what is the modus operandi, and what is the size of the team. Is it 3 people going to come, 5 people are going to come, 7 people going to come? That team information, that audit teams, department audit, GST department audit teams, mobile number, mail ID, to whom it has to be contacted, what documents they want, all this will be mentioned in an intimation letter, and it will be posted to the principal place of business of the registered person, minimum 15 days prior to the actual date of conducting audit. Based on the complexity involved in it, normally 5 days time is granted for doing the audit, sometimes 7 days, sometimes 9 days. This 5 days is they will not come and sit in our office, in the client's office for 5 days. They'll come for 1 or 2 days. In certain cases, 3 days they will come. Maximum 3 days. This is what is our earlier experience in excise and service tax law. But before that, they will work in their office for 2 days. After this audit, they will work for 2 days and they'll come up with a final AO, audit objections. Now, every audit from once the documents are submitted, once the documents, whatever documents called for in the letter, once the document are submitted, maximum the audit has to be completed within 3 months from the commencement. When they will commence, once all the documents are submitted. If in case they want, it will be extended for another 3 months. Sorry, extended up to 6 months on a valid reason. Now, this and all is rare. The 2 small units and all, they will not give extension at all. Again, the registered person will provide all the necessary facility. If the officer come providing a facility towards sitting, electricity, nice air conditioner room, or some other facilities, taking care of all those other natural calls facility, or providing him with adequate food, this, that, all facility, all that need to be provided. Okay. Now, generally, they'll close it within 3 months. There is no question of extending it beyond that time, because it will be a black mark on the perspective of assessee. Think here, it is not a third person. It is not your client. It is not our client. It is not we chartered accountants. It is a department officer. There is an audit wing in every commissionerate. From the audit wing, the department officer will come to the principal place of business of the person, sit there and do the audit. So at no stretch of imagination, it cannot be what? Within 6 months, audit cannot happen at all. Definitely it will happen. See, once notice is issued, he will ask us immediately. So any case, coming back here, whatever facility required, the respective registered person will make. Once the proper officer has confirmed all those findings, he will, once his findings are all over, he intimated his higher ups, he got his permission. He will simply take the permission of this higher up and say the findings within 30 days from the day in which he has completed the audit. There will be a formal completion of audit and an audit objection. These are all audit objection. Or we have accepted, we told you paid, that is how the matter is closed. That is how it will be done. Here we are talking of a department audit, the audit done by the GST department, which is a very common practice in the GST. Coming back here, special audit. What is this special audit? This is an audit done by a chartered accountant or cost accountant, but the chartered accountant or cost accountant is approved by Commissioner of GST, in which cases this special audit will be applicable. In case if the issue involves is a valuation or input tax credit, the issue involved is a valuation issue. The issue involved is a input tax credit issue. then any person not below the rank of assistant commissioner with a prior approval of commissioner of GST can appoint a chartered accountant or a cost accountant to conduct an audit. See, normally in that industry, everybody is claiming 80% only credit. One fellow alone, 96% claiming credit. How 96% someone can claim credit? Everybody will have doubt. How that is possible when we go back and analyze? The situations could be something like this. He would have procured a very big capital goods. Because of that reason, he has a huge credit. Now, there is always one mathematics that will happen. Your tax 100 rupee, how much you are using your input tax credit and paying the tax, how much in cash you are paying, which is called as cash to tax and credit to tax ratio. A ratio of cash to tax and credit to tax. I used 80 rupees of my credit and 20 rupees tax I paid by cash, means I am using 80% credit. Let me repeat, I am using 80% credit. Now, when the industry norm is 80%, one fellow alone claims 96% credit. One fellow keep on incurring loss, but his turnover is growing high. Government don't know. Keep on incurring loss, how your turnover increases, how you could able to do business. Wherever government has a view, it's a special audit, government has a view that somebody books need to be thoroughly detailed, somebody books need to be thoroughly analyzed with lot more details, with additional information. Then they may appoint a chartered accountant or a cost accountant. That chartered accountant or cost accountant has to complete the audit within 90 days and submit a report to the jurisdictional authority. Will not submit to the client. Fees and audit expenses to that chartered accountant will be paid by the commissioner, because on commissioner behalf only he goes. Now, based on the report of the chartered accountant or cost accountant, opportunity of being heard will be given to the other person, that these are all the issues pointed out by the auditor appointed by the department, chartered accountant appointed by the department. The chartered accountant says, you are suppressing your value. You have borrowed a loan from one of the fellow for 500 crores. Instead of paying him interest for the 500 crores, 50 crores, you are reducing your value of supply by 50 crores. This is what we could able to know. Unless and otherwise somebody read agreement, somebody connect debtors, creditors, somebody see the complete picture inside, then only they could able to identify all this. So mere return verification and all, you cannot identify all this. So the auditor has said that this is a possibility of a revenue leakage. What is your view? A view or opportunity of being heard to the registered person will be given. If that fellow accepts, he may accept and pay tax. If the fellow does not accept, then show cause notice will be issued, or further actions under section 73, 74 will be taken. As simple as that, we will stop at that level. A show cause notice will be issued. That fellow will be slapped with the notice. Why not? I can levy tax, interest and penalty on him. So this is a special audit. For this, when the special audit applicable, issue should be in valuation or issue should be in input tax credit. Then he is availing credit more than the normal, or he is selling goods at a very low price and then he is sustaining. How? Department will appoint. Let me repeat, not company. Department will appoint an auditor and do the audit. That is called as special audit. Sir, company will appoint an auditor, will do the audit. No, sir. What is that audit? That audit is called as 9C audit. Section 35 subsection 5 audit. What is this section 35 subsection 5 audit? We will discuss about that at a very macro level. Okay. I'm very clear. I'm not going to get into any of the nitty-gritties, because all that nitty-gritties will take us to a very detailed discussion. Okay. Now, applicability of annual return. Okay. Now, don't be much bothered about this slide. This slide will kill you. Instead, you come to here. If your aggregate turnover is less than 2 crores for the financial year 18-19, then you are not required to file annual return. For you, GST audit is also not applicable. Abba. Sir, My turnover during the financial year is only 1.5 crores. Good. There is no it is not compulsory for you to file annual return. For you, GST audit itself is not applicable. Followed by, sir, my turnover is more than 2 crores, but less than 5 crores. My turnover is 3.5 crores, sir. Good. For you, in the financial year 18-19, my turnover is 3.5 crores. For you, GST audit is not applicable. However, filing of GSTR9 annual return is mandatory. In case a person's aggregate turnover exceeds more than 5 crores, annual return and GST audit is mandatory. Form 9 and 9C. What is 9C, sir? Section 35, subsection 5. On the other day when we read documentation, I told there is an audit which is mandatory. A chartered accountant or a cost accountant can be engaged by a company. A chartered accountant or cost accountant can be engaged by a company to do a GST audit. As part of their GST audit, when it will be applicable? If somebody's turnover exceed 5 crore, then only GST audit is applicable. If somebody turnover is less than 5 crore, GST audit is not applicable. What is the due date, sir? For the 18-19, due date is 30th September. 30th September is the due date for filing 18-19 GST audit. And again, when it comes to 18-19 GST audit, up to 5 crore rupees, assessees are exempted from GST audit. Above 5 crores only are brought in, which is a very small turnover. 7% of the total assessees, 93% of the assessees, GST audit is not applicable, which means for them what will come tomorrow at a later date? Scrutiny of return or department audit, that alone will come. Either 65 will come or 61 will come. 61, 65 for 93%. 7% alone, 61, 65, 66 and 35, 5. Too much of section numbers now. Agree. The control is required somehow. Okay. Audit by department, audit by the company by themselves as per a reconciliation statement and filing of 9C, plus a special audit or a scrutiny of return. Everything is possible if somebody turnover crosses more than 5 crores. If they don't submit within 30th September, what will happen, sir? 100 rupees the late fee for CGST. Again, one more 100 rupee for SGST, followed by 100 rupees CGST, 100 rupees SGST. Once both are done, maximum late fee is 0.25% of their turnover. That sums up the discussion. But our core discussion is to whom this is applicable. Now, as part of GST audit by a chartered accountant, when he is appointed by a company, what and all he should cover in Form 9C. In fact, Form GSTR 9C has two parts, Part A and Part B. Part A talks of a reconciliation statement. Part B talks of a certification on certain matters. Part A, what, sir? Some basic information will be captured in Part A. Name, financial year, address, all that stuff and all. Part 2 discuss about a reconciliation between Form GSTR 9. Recollect, I think yesterday Shankar Narayanan would have went through the Form 9. As per Form 9 annual return, which is filed by the respective company, the GST auditor will go and compare and verify a reconciliation of the turnover declared. Turnover as per annual return, turnover as per financial statement, both will be compared, reconciled by the GST auditor and certified. Similarly, reconciliation of taxes paid. The tax paid by the assessee reported annually in 9 will be compared with the GST. Will be compared by the assessor, by the GST audit. Return filed and as per books comparison. ITC claimed as per return and ITC available as per books compared. and the respective chart accountant comes up with a separate certificate, an independent certificate, where in the independent certificate, the chart accountants ensure that these are all complied with. With due respect, many people are not giving adequate weightage for all these transactions. Whether returns filed are properly, all the returns filed are properly filed or not is to be taken care. Whether the books and records mentioned as per section 31, 35 are being maintained by the person. Whether the annual return is filled correctly, whether they have claimed the exemption correctly, rate of tax correctly, whether on the output tax, whatever rate that they charge, is it correct? Whatever input tax credit claimed by them, is it correct? Whether the reconciliation statement is correct. All the information which is provided by the assessee are correct, complete. In my humble view, if a good GST audit is done by a chartered accountant, or of course cost accountant, then good serious GST audit is done, that assessee should not have no problem, or the assessee should know what is the problem. Today the problem is many times one end, as part of various business challenges and compliance challenges, the business houses are not appointing people who are all good in that subject. Somehow they appoint one person, number tally po. Then problem is tomorrow, left, right, center, we are all getting notice being slapped, left, right, center. My humble view is this compliance has to be taken little seriously by the organization. No doubt, section 35, subsection 5, read along with rule 80, comes up with a proposal. Any person's turnover exceed 5 crore, his books will be audited by a chartered accountant and a reconciliation statement will be submitted. Broadly 5 parts, what it contains alone we'll discuss without getting into any nitty-gritties. Basic information, financial year, GST number, all that information will be captured. In part 2, table number 5, one reconciliation will be drawn. What is the turnover as per P&L account? What is the turnover as per P&L account? Discount received, credit note issued or credit note received, which are all effect not given in GST, or because of valuation related matters, foreign currency fluctuation, if your income is going to get increased, then all that will be reduced to arrive a number which will match with the turnover as declared in Form GST R9. So turnover as per audited financial statement will be compared with the turnover as per Form GST. Once it is compared, you will have differences. If you have a difference, maybe they have to come up with reason for differences. I'm not going beyond this, because if I step in anything beyond this, I have to be more technical on this topic. My intention is to just give you a flavor. A table like this is there. At your leisure, you read through it. Okay. Beyond that, I'm very, very clear. Now, the table number 7 now concentrates on, earlier table concentrated on gross turnover, which will include taxable supply and exempted supply. Now this table concentrates on taxable turnover. They arrived at turnover after adjustments. From earlier table, they got the numbers. They removed all the exempted supply. They removed all the zero rated supply without payment of tax. And all those inward supplies on which tax payable. They now compare this number with the taxable turnover. That is, in annual return, you have reported on 30 crore rupees I have paid tax. As per from your books, 50 crores, 20 crores exempted and zero rated. If I reduce, this is also 30 crores. Good. Book, as per books, 30 crores minus 20 crores, 50 crores minus 30, 20 crores, 30 crores. As per return, 30 crores matches. That's what is reconciliation. Understand broadly, that's all. Nitty gritty will always be there. If you step in, you can learn it. Broadly, our intention is first gross turnover. As per P&L, 50 crores. As per return, GST return, as per annual return, 45 crores. 5 crores, what difference? 5 crore difference is very simple. unbilled revenue. What is unbilled revenue? I'm going to bill only in the starting of next month. This month end itself, I'll pass a revenue accounting entry. It's an accounting entry from the trial balance, sorry, from the financial statement, reduce financial statement or trial balance. From the financial statement, reduce your unbilled revenue, 5 crores. Good, matches with my reported turnover in the return, 45 crores. Now, go with that 45 crores. From 45 crores, I have reported as per books, exempted turnover is 15 crores. I removed that. Now my taxable turnover is 30 crores as per reconciliation statement. Go to annual return 9. Check that number. 30 crores matched. Fellow has correctly reported what turnovers. Matter ends there. Now what is the next comparison? Taxes paid. For 30 crores, 5% so much, 12% so much, 18% so much. As per books, I brought that information. This fellow also liable to pay RCM. I have also put 512 so much of RCM. Now compare it with tax paid as per what? GSTR 9. Again, great, matched. As per return, my tax payable is on that 30 crores. Let's say it is going to be 12 crores. Oh, sorry, not 12 crores. It's 8 crores. Now, as per books also, I go and see, put all those information. Yes, everything matches. There would be possibility of data entry errors. In the books, I correctly booked it as 5%, sorry, 12%. But in the return, when I filed it as 5%. In the book, I have correctly booked it as 28%. But in the return, I filed it as 18%. Vice versa problem also. In the book, it is correctly mentioned as 18%. While I'm paying, I paid it as what? 28%. There can be a short, there can be excess. If it is a short, pay now the difference tax along with interest. If there is an excess, claim refund if you are well within the refund time limits. Followed by reconciliation of ITC claimed. As per books, I have so much credit. As per 3B, I have claimed so much credit. Next year, I have claimed so much credit. All matched. That's all. So much credit is there which I have not claimed. That will be lapsed. Okay, write a reason. Sometimes people would have double time availed credit and all in 3B. How they will know? As per books, 5 lakhs credit. As per 3B, 6.5 lakhs. Everyone is surprised. 6.5 lakhs, how year? No, last year 1 lakh I claim now. Okay, 1 lakh you claim now. Again also 50,000 excess. Yes, we have to check. When we go and check, it is a double time credit. Same invoice, he has availed twice credit. So that can be determined by reconciling your input tax credit with the GST return. Similarly, expenses wise breakup. In what expenses, how much ITC you have claimed, a complete breakup of input tax credit, capital goods, everything will be given. On purchase of raw material, so much credit. On freight, so much credit. On other matters, so much credit. On expenses wise breakup, for the 5 lakh rupee ITC you have claimed will be given. That will be form part of your table 14. Any differences and the tax payable will form part of your final table. Let me repeat. My intention is not get into details. That's why I brought a very broad slide. My idea is, come on, understand, as part of your GST audit, which a lot of us are going to get engaged very quickly in the next 2-3 weeks, that GSTR 9C in-house so much information. Because many times that weightage which is required for this is not given, is my humble submission. That sums up the presentation that we have for the day. And I have few queries. Yes, I would take it up those queries as part of this discussion. In case if you have any questions, yes, we can post it over here. To start with, a general question. Can a GST auditor file monthly return, GST return of the client? In my view, see, you have to be independent. Ideal is, it is not advisable. It is the same person filing return and same person reviewing it. It's not ideal, but there is no hard and fast rule, Suresh ji. But always it is advisable. If possible, if you could able to create a supplementary firm, then you can always create a supplementary firm and you can ensure that it is taken care by it. It's more question of the chartered accountant, how independent he is going to be. when he is going to file the return, and if any error is there, how far fair he is going to be in pointing out that error that is being happened there. That will be the final point. MC Rajendran sir has raised a question. What would be the role of practitioner, GST practitioner, more specifically? GST practitioner role is in, like Suresh ji raised, supporting the client in compliance perspective, wherever possible, representing the client on a compliance perspective. Those areas are going to be the areas of the GST practitioner. See, nobody is an expert in GST. That is the challenge that we have today. We may all feel that we are aware of many information, but on a careful reading, our understanding would change. When we interact with many people, again an understanding would change, and we have various decisions under the erstwhile law. Many aspects need to be taken care. So just like that, decisions are taken. So to support the clients, those are all should be the broader what is it, parameters with which a GST practitioners work. If the company is not conducting a GST audit on its own, what would happen? A nice question, sir. Satish sir has raised this question. If GST audit is not conducted, tomorrow government will invoke best judgment assessment. If you have exported goods or services, government will say, I will not treat it as export, pay me GST on that. If you have claimed some refund, I will not allow your refund as valid, because there's a possibility you can claim on an ineligible item also refund. My officer would have granted it without due verification of it also. So in my view, that should not be the case. If anyone has not done any fines, you are aware of it. If it is not done, it is always advisable to ensure the comply is done. Now it is also not late. You can do it for 17, 18. Now the date is coming for 18, 19. It can be done. I would not say it can be done. It should be done. Otherwise, there are going to be a lot of penal consequences. And the department can view it very vaguely. As long as you have a better understanding with your jurisdictional officer is receptive and listening to you. Maybe it could be some challenges in your organizations could be possible, but always it is ideal. Why? Because no, if I appoint a GST auditor, he will identify some mistake. People don't want to be pointed out. It's not pointing out here. The point that I want to drive home here is sometimes if there are error, it has to be accepted. How far we can able to manage that error, how far it is possible, that alone can be tactical. So Prakasham VCM has raised, this is related to place of supply. Okay. Removable property in Kerala. Okay. You are typing your question, sir. So Prakasham, sir, it's very simple. You can unmute yourself and raise if in case it takes a little more time to you. Because all of you can, if you want to raise a question, you can always unmute yourself and raise a question. Immovable property in Kerala, IGST invoice to be issued or SGST invoice to be issued? Very tough question. Where is your supplier located? Siva Prakasam sir, where is supplier located? Supplier located in Tamil Nadu. Property is in Kerala. Now, recipient is in Kerala, assuming. I'll ask a fundamental question. How come it is possible for a supplier in Tamil Nadu to have a property in Kerala? Is it a rental contract or a lease contract? Siva Prakasam sir, if it is a simple rental contract or a lease contract, is the property is given on a lease, long-term lease, or is it just a one-day stay? Just one-day stay, you should have a license there, no, for temporary accommodation. No, I am again not getting Sir, give me three information, sir. You told property is in Kerala. Where is the supplier located? Where is the recipient located? LOS, location of supplier. Supplier in Kerala. Good. Property in Kerala. I am sorry, Sivaprakasam sir. You should have raised the first supplier question only. Supplier in Kerala, immovable property in Kerala. Kerala CGST, SGST will be applicable. That's all. There is no question of IGST at all. In an immovable property, IGST is a rare. Let me repeat. IGST is rare. Always CGST, SGST will come. If it is IGST, then we have to carefully read the situation, facts and situation, because it is rare as I earlier highlighted. Always it will be CGST and SGST. So this sums up our discussion. Tomorrow we will have a discussion on exempted goods and services. Like today we will have a little delayed login by 6:15 because of I have another commitment. I have to close that commitment and come back to my home because of this. Otherwise, I would take it up from office. And office bandwidth is not supporting me in a great way. So we'll do one thing. We'll meet tomorrow about